Hey everybody, welcome back to another comic book review. In this video I'll be talking about The Crow by James O'Barr. This is the special edition of this book. It comes with around 30 pages of extra artwork that wasn't in the original volume. And this book tells the story of Eric, who he, along with his wife, was killed by a group of criminals. And a year later, on the exact date that he and his wife were killed, he comes back from the dead in order to exact his revenge on this group of criminals. And, he can take a lot of bullets. He can take tons of shots and, stab wounds and stuff. He can take all this stuff because he's already dead. And so he's pretty much invincible at this point. So he just comes back from beyond the grave to get revenge on the people that killed him and his wife. Now, I'll start off by saying I am a huge fan of the film The Crow, directed by Alex Proyas, starring Brandon Lee. Love that movie. So I was very excited to read this book to kind of see where the movie got its inspiration. And I gotta say, there are a few movies that I think do it better than the book, but The Crow is one of those that I think the movie is far better than the original book on which it's based. Not to say that this is a terrible book, there's something about the movie that clicks with me way more than this book did. A lot of that has to do with the narrative flow of this book and the pacing and the structure of the story. There are so many tonal inconsistencies throughout this book, where you'll get a real crazy action scene that admittedly is not done very well, because you can't really ever tell who is getting hit, who's getting shot, what's happening to who and where. It's all just like a big blur, which maybe that's part of the style. Doesn't work for me. But in this book, there are scenes like those, and then just seemingly endless scenes of the Crow, our main character, just dancing around his apartment and brooding and reciting poetry. There's a ton of poetry all throughout this book, and it doesn't work in the way that, say, Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics did, because Neil Gaiman's Sandman had a lot of references to poetry and song lyrics and all kinds of stuff, and it worked really well. But there are just pages that are thrown in here that just have poems in them for no apparent reason, and the whole book kind of has a very gothic feel about it, but it doesn't know how to balance the tones as well as I would have liked it to. In terms of positives, though, there are some really cool one-liners in this book, which, taking them for what they are, in those moments that they're said, they're pretty cool, but that isn't enough to completely redeem the story for me. And also, the artwork is good, for the most part, but there are so many different types of artwork in this book that, along with the story structure, it all feels very uneven, and the flow just is not there for me, because you'll have these almost they almost look like they're painted. You have these scenes like this, where it has a very clean sort of look to it, and then you get scenes like this where characters have very cartoony facial expressions, and it just doesn't always work for me. Do I think this is a terrible book? No. Is it one I'll ever read again? Not anytime soon, no. I'm far, far, far more likely to rewatch the movie than I am to read this book again. Um, and I think I will say this. As far as indie comics go, because this came out in the 90s when, um, you know, back in the 80s, you got Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns, and those were kind of responsible for um, opening up the graphic novel as sort of a medium that should be respected by mainstream readers. And it kind of opened up the genre of comics, or the medium of comics, rather, to the public. But at that time, you know, a lot of indie creators weren't really getting a whole lot of their stuff out there. It was mostly just like big companies, namely DC and Vertigo, and also some Marvel stuff as well. But aside from like the big two, DC and Marvel, and like the superhero comics and stuff like that, there weren't a whole lot of artists in terms of like indie comics that were very mainstream. But I think The Crow, along with Todd McFarlane's Spawn, kind of helped to bring those out into the mainstream. But this is very much one of those works that I think is like at the beginning of that era, whenever indie comics were becoming more accessible to the public and more mainstream. And I feel like if this hadn't happened, if The Crow hadn't happened, there wouldn't be other far, far better examples of creator-owned independent comics works out there. So I think this, along with Spawn, definitely helped to pave the way. But is this the top of the form when it comes to those types of comics? I don't think so. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Crow by James O'Barr. Thank you very much for watching, as always, and look forward to more videos in the future. Have a great day.